Hello and welcome here to Champions League build-up here on Talk FCB as we build up to the big one, Chelsea against Barcelona, coming up in just a few days' time on Tuesday. And what we're going to do here now is start our build-up, start up the videos as we look ahead to that colossal clash in the Champions League round of 16 stage. And what I thought we would do as the very first video is basically have a look into our opposition, because I think it's really important, obviously, to understand our own game, obviously to understand what this game is going to entail, but also to keep a really close eye on what we're coming up against here, because I think it's really important, especially in this type of game, obviously to understand what we ourselves are going to do, but it's also really important to get to know our opposition. What are their strengths? What are Chelsea going to bring to the table? How have they been playing this season? And most importantly, what exactly should we target in terms of what their weaknesses are? What are they not doing well? What can we really look at and target in their team? And exactly what are they going to bring to the table under Antonio Conte in terms of their system and their formation? So we're going to be having a look at Chelsea in a lot of detail in this video and having a look at what we can really target. So first of all, just to give you a brief overview of what Chelsea's season has been like, they're currently 4th in the Premier League. They've a pretty poor defence, to be honest, of their excellent title win in the previous campaign. They won the league under Antonio Conte in his first season at Chelsea. That was a very good thing, but this season not so good. 4th right now in the Premier League. They're 19 points away from Manchester City in first, and right now they're only 1 point ahead of Tottenham, who are in 5th, and right now their aim certainly is to secure European football, Champions League football next season by finishing in that top 4. They're currently in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. They secured that path with a win over Hull City on Friday night. They're going to face Leicester in those quarter-finals. They were knocked out the Carabao Cup, which is the other English League Cup that currently goes on in England. They lost in the semi-finals in that game to Arsenal over 2 legs, and they also, of course, in the Champions League finished 2nd in their group. They were very close to finishing top, but Roma beat them to that simply on the head-to-head record after Chelsea were absolutely destroyed away from home, 3-0 to Roma, and that was a really bad performance from Chelsea in the Champions League. But along the way in the group stage, they did finish above Atletico Madrid. They got a very good victory away at Atletico at the Wanda Metropolitano. 2-1 it was on the day, so they did have some good results in the Champions League, but right now certainly their focus is on the top 4 in the Premier League, the FA Cup, and if they can manage it, the Champions League too. But like I said, for me, really important that we focus on Antonio Conte and what exactly Chelsea are going to bring to the table in terms of their formation, their style of play. And under Antonio Conte, Chelsea have been playing pretty much 3 at the back now for over a year. Now, it's very important to note that when Antonio Conte first came into the club, came in of course from the Italian national team. Before that, he was at Juventus, and at all of those sides, he adopted 3 at the back or 5 at the back. You know, there's 2 different variations. When you're attacking, you like to have the 3, and then your wing backs going forward. When you're defending, it certainly becomes a 5. And when Antonio Conte was appointed at Chelsea, he didn't actually start straight away with a traditional formation. He tried to do things a little bit differently, but they were very heavily losing to Arsenal. And at half-time, he changed the formation, he changed to a back 3, and then they went on a fantastic run, and they won the league. And since then, they've stuck with that. Conte likes to have his 3 centre-backs, 2 wing-backs then supporting those defenders. He likes to have 2 deep-lying centre midfield players, and then a front 3. Usually a centre-forward. He will very seldom go with 2 strikers, usually just the 1 striker, and then 2 wingers playing off that, and sometimes those wingers will come a bit central as well to get into the game, particularly Eden Hazard, who we'll be coming on to a bit later in the video. And make no mistake about it, I spoke about the 2 different variations, a back 3 and a back 5. Against us, you will absolutely be able to bet your house this will be a back 5. You'll have your 3 centre-backs, and the 2 wing-backs will be very deep indeed. Chelsea will come into this game, even at home, and they will seat very deep, they'll be very compact, everything really that we don't usually enjoy facing about teams that we come up against in the Champions League, and also the league as well. They'll certainly try to hit us on the counter-attack as much as they possibly can. Even at home, like I say, they'll have no problem with sitting back, letting us enjoy possession of the ball. We'll have the majority of the ball, no doubt about that, and they're only going to break when they see the opportunity to do so. And just to give you an idea about how Conte's style isn't necessarily based around having the ball, Man City this season have averaged 71 possession at home under Pep Guardiola. That's the most in the Premier League. Chelsea, though, have only had the 6th best possession record at home, just over 57% of the ball they've enjoyed. And just to give you a comparison on that, we average nearly 66% at home under Valverde in La Liga and 63% possession away. So certainly Conte's philosophy is not to do with ball possession, it's about intensity, having those players very much up for it, understanding their roles tactically, and being very very defensively structured. Certainly Conte's teams build from the back, not in terms of playing out the back with the ball, but making sure they've got a very solid base that they can build on, they can counter-attack, and if they get 1 or 2 goals, they would certainly expect to win that game. You've got to focus on clean sheets, and that's the thing this season. Chelsea haven't really been that solid defensively. And then I want to come on to the mentality of this team, because by far and away, forget tactics, forget formations, forget players, the mentality of this Chelsea group for me is the biggest thing about this game, because personally I think, looking at it as an overall season, Chelsea are having a bad one. They're having a bad season so far. They've had some really bad results in the past few months, and even really in the last few weeks. You can look even just, very recently against Watford, against Bournemouth, they lost 3-0 at home to Bournemouth, and against Watford away from home they lost 4-1. That is not Chelsea. That does not sound like a Chelsea team or an Antonio Conte team. But the big question here for me is, what right now is the mentality of this group? Because Chelsea of old, Chelsea with their senior players like John Terry, like Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, they would find a way of finding very big Champions League results if they were fully on board with a coach, if they were behind their manager, and that's what's so important for me. If they were behind their coach, they would get the result somehow, because you only got to look at the 11-12 season, 2012, when Chelsea won the Champions League. They finished 6th in that season, so they clearly had a very bad league season, but Di Matteo came in, they changed their manager halfway through the season, they somehow find a way past Pep's Barca in 2012, and they went on to win the Champions League simply because those senior players came together and they got them over the line. And that's the big question for me. Are these players willing to do absolutely everything on that pitch against us for their coach, Antonio Conte? And honestly, I'm not so sure they are. They've had 2 good results in the last week or so. They beat West Brom 3-0, they beat Hull City 4-0 in the FA Cup. But there's a but even to those results, simply because West Brom, likely to be relegated from the Premier League this season, they're currently right down the bottom of the Premier League table. And Hull City as well, they're actually likely to be relegated to the 3rd tier of English football. They're right at the bottom right now of the Championship in England. So I don't really know how much you can read into those wins. Have they just really been papering over the cracks? Because that's the thing. We know that if these Chelsea players aren't behind Conte, if they aren't behind the manager, you know that Chelsea players have a track record of completely downing tools if they aren't behind their coach. We've seen it under Jose Mourinho. The players completely stopped trying under him. They ended up in the bottom half of the Premier League table before Chelsea were pretty much forced to sack Mourinho. We've seen it under Andre Villas-Boas a few years before that, where the senior players basically turned against him and got him sacked all on their own. If these Chelsea players aren't behind their coach, you will see a completely different side, and I would fancy our chances massively more. Because for me, even though they've had 2 good results of late, like I said, that was against pretty poor opposition. I still think when it comes down to it, when you come into a really difficult game, I still don't see a fully united team here. I really don't. And on that subject, it does bring me on to Chelsea's strengths and weaknesses. And while we're on the subject, we just as well start with the weaknesses of Chelsea, in which for me, there's 2 very key areas in this team that we must target. We absolutely have to target the centre of their defence and the centre of their midfield, which suits us really well, because we like to play down the centre of the field. We don't really like to use the wings. Chelsea no doubt will try to be very narrow and allow us that space out wide, but we want to be targeting the centre of the pitch, simply because at centre back and at centre midfield they are vulnerable. I don't particularly think their wing backs are of massive quality, and I think they have issues up front as well, but for me, the heart of their defence and the midfield are definitely those areas that we need to target. And we're going to start with looking at their back 3. Now, before I even start here, Azpilicueta and Christensen are very good players. 2 centre-back players at Chelsea. Azpilicueta sort of been moulded into a centre-back, but he's a very good defender. And those 2 players there are Chelsea's best defenders by a country mile. But it's the 3rd centre-back for me, which is the area where we can target and where it all falls down for Chelsea. Simply because they've got somebody like Gary Cahill, who could start this game, who Chelsea fans absolutely chastise every single game. They really don't like Cahill. And to be honest, it's with good reason. For me, when you look at Cahill in that team, he's likely to make, I would say, at least 1 big mistake per game. And if you make that kind of mistake against us, I would hope that we would be clinical enough to finish that and really make them pay. The other option they've got is David Luiz, who was really impressive during their title win last season, but this season he's completely fallen out of favour with Antonio Conte. And then there's Rudiger, who was brought in the summer. He came in from Serie A, but he hasn't really impressed this season. He hasn't really established himself at the heart of that defence. And he as well, there's a bit of question marks over him. So that leaves them with a real problem with that back 3, because that's the problem when you play with a back 3, and that's the problem that Conte has. When you have that back 3, you need every single player in that unit to be united, to be absolutely in sync with one another, and I don't see that right now. If you've got one player in there that's letting you down, that's making mistakes, that's not stepping up or not dropping off correctly, you're going to be in big trouble, and that's where I think we can target it. If there's one weak link, we've got to go for that and go for the jugular. And then we move on to their midfield area, and once again, I'm going to say, you know, Kante is an absolutely phenomenal midfield player, a brilliant defensive player. I think he's certainly not part of the problem here, but it's his partner. That's where the problem lies. Once again, in order for this system to work, you need both of those holding players to be in perfect harmony, and that for me is certainly not the case. Chelsea in the summer sold Nemanja Matic to United. That was a massive mistake for me. They brought Bakayoko in from Monaco, and that has been an absolute disaster. And actually, unfortunately for us, Bakayoko will not be playing any part in the first leg because he has made mistake after mistake after mistake this season, and they've got a real problem on who they partner with Kante in there. Is it going to be Danny Drinkwater, who they signed from Leicester? And for me, that one looks massively like a panic buy. He's not really somebody who fits defensively or offensively in that Conte system. And then, of course, there's the option to play Fabregas, you know, a very quality player. We know all about him. He's certainly effective when you're going forward, when he's playing those incisive passes, and in possession as well. He's very assured. But for me, defensively, if you play him in a 2, he can be exposed. And like we mentioned earlier, Chelsea aren't really expecting much of the ball, so Fabregas is not really going to be at his best in that 2. And Chelsea's problems in midfield have even been bigger highlighted simply because there's actually been rumours of David Luiz coming in and playing in that midfield area alongside Kante. 2 very defensive players, and it's clear right now that Conte isn't really sure what to go with. Is he going to go with Drinkwater, who I think at this level certainly hasn't got the experience? Is he going to throw Luiz in there? There's clear problems between the 2. Luiz has not been good this season, and Chelsea at the back in that third man have a problem, and in midfield alongside Kante, who is going to partner him? Chelsea there with 2 massive problems that we must expose. However, I'm not just going to sit here and say that obviously Chelsea have no quality, they've got no chance of winning this game. It's not like that whatsoever. Those are the weaknesses, but they do have some strengths as well. Of course they do. They are a good team. They've been in the Champions League. They finished from their group in second above Atletico Madrid. They do have quality. And the man that we'll start with, of course, where else to start but with Eden Hazard. And it's simply as simple as that. It doesn't really need any explanation. On his day for me, Eden Hazard can cause any team, any defence in the world problems. I still don't really think Hazard is as consistent as he should be, simply because with somebody as that much talent, that much quality, you want to see them performing every single week, performing at the highest level in the biggest games. You want to see that, and I still think Hazard has a little way to go, but of course he's a huge threat. He's got a massive threat down that left hand side, and we're going to have to be extremely careful, especially given Roberto in the past has suffered problems at right back in the Champions League. We'll have to be so careful marking Hazard, and that's certainly something we're going to come on to in previous videos, looking at that battle a lot more closely. I also think the addition of Olivier Giroud is a very big one for Chelsea. Antonio Conte was intent on bringing in sort of a vocal point in their attack in the January transfer window, and I think Giroud actually is very underrated, maybe not in terms of his goal scoring, but what he can provide off the ball and the chances that he can provide for his teammates. And I think certainly Giroud can help bring the likes of Hazard into the game. He can hold the play up, he's quite good technically as well, he can cause a problem in the air, he's a physical presence, and I think he gives Chelsea a different dimension in that attack, simply because I think Morata, since he joined Chelsea from Real Madrid, he's scored some goals, but I don't think he's really kicked on as much as they were expecting, and I think certainly Giroud gives them a little bit extra, a little bit more strength and depth. Then there's the likes of Willian, Pedro, players who can play out wide, they can chip in with goals, assists, but I think both of those players, sometimes they're brilliant, sometimes they're not. They've certainly shown some inconsistency this season, and I wouldn't really highlight either of those as massive threats for Chelsea. But finally, the strength that we all know far too well, and that is Thibaut Courtois, who for me is one of the best goalkeepers in the world without any question. He was absolutely sensational when Atletico Madrid won the league, of course. They beat us to the league over the course of that season, and during that season we actually failed to score past Courtois in the league. So we've got to really hope that on Tuesday he doesn't have one of those games where he's saving absolutely everything, because he does have that quality, he does have that about him, and I would seriously worry if he was on form on Tuesday night, because even if we get past Chelsea's defence, we still have to beat Courtois, and he is of a huge quality. So for me, my overall assessment of Chelsea would simply be that we're facing a side here who had a very mixed season. They're certainly an inconsistent side. They're not really sure whether the players are with Conte, whether they're against him, whether they're all united around what exactly he's trying to do, but we still have to be massively wary of them. They still have some very good players, some big players who on a big occasion at Stamford Bridge can certainly cause us problems, and you know that on the night Chelsea could make something happen if they turn up up, and if they all chip in together and make it happen for them, and of course their fans as well will be massively with them. So we've got to apply ourselves in the best possible way to get through this one, and we of course will be looking at what we can bring to the table, what we're going to do to Chelsea. We of course are going to take the game to them, and I will have a lot more coming up in more videos as we prepare for this massive game. It is Chelsea against Barca, it is the Champions League, and it's coming very, very soon indeed. So leave all your thoughts and your comments down below with regard to Chelsea, guys. Where do you think they have problems? Where do you think that we can really target them? And let me know as well, what are you wary of? What are you scared about Chelsea, if anything, going into this game? Please do let me know all your thoughts and your comments down below. And as always, guys, I will see you very, very soon indeed with more videos. But until then, as always, Vasca el Barça!